and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm Blondie.
And I'm T. And welcome, everybody, to the very last episode of Oxspookterfest.
Yay!
Do you hear the tears sliding down my cheeks, heading towards my broken heart?
And can you envision me doing a happy dance?
Yes, I can. I have Snoopy vibes right now.
You know what? Exactly. That's exactly what I look like.
I know. And no, it's not our last one. It's just the last one for the year. So we'll get back on track next year.
You'll survive for a year.
Maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
It'll be touch and go.
There you go.
So what are we doing this week?
This week, I'm very excited. We are doing a story about werewolves. And when I say a story about werewolves, I'm talking about some legit documented stuff from way back when to now.
Wow.
I know. I'm excited.
Yeah, we can tell. So, you know what? That just reminded me. Do you remember when we actually saw a wolf in Big Bear?
On our girls' weekend?
On our girls' weekend? We
Yes, I do.
Had to park in the back because our room was in the back. And after we checked in, we were getting out of the car and you walked over to me and we both looked at this giant wolf. Remember?
I believe I said, "Hey, that looks like a wolf." And you were like, "Are you sure? It might just be a big dog." I was like, "Nah, that's a wolf."
That's where we proceeded to hop into my car
Yes, we did.
and discuss our options.
Yes, we did. And the wolf just stayed there. Remember? It just stayed there looking at us. It kept staring. I think I saw it lick its lips a couple times.
It's going lunch.
Lunch and dinner.
And leftovers for the family.
That little one looks kind of sweet. She might be dessert.
We were trying to figure out how we were going to get into our room because we had to climb that flight of stairs. And of course, we had things packed in our car.
I know. We had way too much stuff.
But yeah, we were trying to figure out how to get up there, how to run past, because I'm sure that it would have outrun both of us.
And like I told you in the car, I didn't have to run faster than it. I just needed to run faster than you.
And the funny thing is, I think you can run faster than me.
I think I can too. That is really weird because I'm not much of a runner.
And I'm 5 inches taller than you?
More than that.
So anyway, we were sitting in the car and didn't it get up and it kind of headed away towards the road like it was going to leave?
Yeah, I think it was trying to get in our head like, you guys are cool now. Like, I can't run that fast. Go ahead and get out of the car. Come on. I dare you.
And I think eventually it did go away.
No, it didn't go away. Remember, it went down the road about 50 feet because you were facing the road and we could see him. You left your headlights on so we could see him. And he just went down the road and then he just turned around and laid there and looked at us. And I'm sure he was thinking, they both look like they can't run worth crap. And I'm going to totally score on this right now. And so we really had to just kind of be like, all right, let's do this. And we did. We just booked it.
Yes, and I'm sure it was a sight.
I'm sure it was. And we didn't even take everything in.
We took in just what we needed.
But that was such a weird weekend. Remember, the electricity went out in the entire town. So
right.
No electricity. We had to do our activities by candlelight.
And we turned the stove on, so we had some heat.
Yes, the stove was heat. The stove lit the candles. And then we had to run to the supermarket and there was no way to pay. You had to pay with cash and it was just a whole thing. Then it snowed that weekend and it wasn't supposed to. We were not prepared.
Oh, no, we were not prepared.
And I totally remember we were like, oh, whatever. We're going to be in the cabin, not like we're going anywhere.
In the beginning, it was cool. We were outside. Yeah. Oh, we're going to be snow. Da, da, da. Yeah.
Yeah. We're SoCal girls. We're stupid. We love the snow. And then it was time to leave and your car was completely snowed in. And of course, we didn't have the right shoes or anything. So I'll never forget. You put 2 Stater Brothers bags on your boots, walked outside and started shoveling the snow away from your car. I helped by taking pictures, of course.
Yes, you did. That could be an advertisement for Stater Brothers at that point.
And the worst best friend ever.
Right. That is just one of many of our adventures in our lifetimes.
Yep, we made it out of there. We were not a wolf snack. And here we are to tell the story. All right, let's get into some other wolf stories. Not as interesting as ours, but
Well, of course not.
let's let the grim begin. Across the world and as far back as 1000 BCE, before Common Era, the legend of the notorious werewolf has been embodied in nearly every culture known to man. In folklore, a werewolf or lycanthrope is generally described as a human being who can shapeshift into a ferocious hybrid, half man, half wolf type creature, complete with all the werewolfy strength and fearlessness that goes with it. And yes, of course there were wolves as well, but we're not going to be talking about normal, beautiful, but scary in the mountain wolves. We're talking about inexplicably huge, hairy, snarly, scary, big-toothed werewolves.
So basically me in the morning.
Pretty much. I mean, your teeth aren't that big, though. I find stories like this super fascinating because even though it's really hard to believe that there's like a shape-shifting creature that existed then or now, there's a bajillion stories out there from many centuries ago, and they were not just these fun, scary, made-up bedtime stories. They were some serious stories of genuine fear with warnings that had grown men shaking in their boots at the thought of coming across such an unholy creature. Werewolves are right up there with vampires, witches, and ghosts. You either believe or you don't.
Honestly, I kind of believe anything is possible.
I'm starting to be that way as well. But like most things, the werewolf lore had to have started from something tangible somewhere. And these stories are usually based on some smidgen of truth. Even if it's exaggerated, there's always some speck of reality in there somewhere, right?
Right. It's like that old saying, there's a little truth in every joke.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, how have these stories survived for so many centuries? So we're going to get into some old-timey werewolf stories that are still very much believed today, as well as more current stories of just a couple of years ago, where there is a ton of documentation about some very werewolfy creatures right here in the good old USA. I do want to say that nowadays, like you were saying earlier, I'm much more open-minded to things that seemed utterly unbelievable even just a few years ago. Because it seems like with advanced science and technology, more, quote, unbelievable things are being proven to actually exist. We won't go down that rabbit trail, though, because we could be here for weeks. But just think about it.
Weeks is an understatement. And honestly, I don't even need to think about it because I'm totally on that open-minded train with you.
I think this podcast is opening up a lot of things for both of us.
I fully agree. I'm struggling staying home by myself more than I used to.
That stuff doesn't bother me. It's just really opening up my mind to different things. There's always been a connection between wolves and humans in lore and in ancient literature. In the Middle Ages, werewolves were written into many stories and documented as legit. But these supernatural creatures were considered of the occult and they were tied to witchcraft. And just like witches, if you were accused of being a werewolf, you could be executed.
Wow, talk about harsh.
Well, it seems harsh, but I mean, what were they supposed to do? Just let them run around and eating everything and everybody?
But if they were just accused of being one, shouldn't they prove it?
They didn't do it for the witches.
Very true.
It was a different way of thinking back then. Being that werewolves are considered to be partially human, they have been characterized into 3 different types. The first type is the innocent victim, who is a man who is cursed and turns into a wolf but maintains his humanity. The second is the damned, a violent person who transforms to a wolf as punishment. So this one, I don't think they really thought it through, because why would you give an already violent person superpowers?
Good point.
I mean, come on, you guys.
They didn't think things through.
It's a reward.
Let's help you out.
The third one, the warrior, is a human who purposefully becomes a wolf to aid in battles. This type is usually associated with what was called berserkers. These warriors were ancient Nordic fighters who donned the skin of a predatory animal and then took on their spirit and characteristics during battle. Bears, wolves, and boars were revered by berserkers. They also believed that by literally donning the skin of that particular animal, a slight transformation might occur. So they would fight with this crazed predatory violence, just like their animal of choice. You could hear great snorting, howling, and even roaring on the battlefields. You know, I definitely would like to be a fly on that longhouse wall of one of those battles because that had to be a sight to see. But I'd be scared right out of my own fuzzy skin if one of those big berserky dudes came after me. Nay, thank you.
First of all, I didn't realize that there was actually 3 classifications.
Yeah, I mean, at least for, this particular part of the world.
Wow. And berserkers?
I kind of love it.
I held in my laughter just for you.
Thank you.
And so I guess the teen wolf would have been an innocent victim. You do know that I was going to bring that up at some point.
Of course you were. You probably saw the movie and everything.
I saw all of them.
I've only seen the old black and white Wolfman. That's it.
You haven't seen any with Michael J. Fox. What's wrong with you?
Come on. Michael J. Fox in a what? A Letterman's jacket and a furry face? No, thank you. I'm good.
Where's your insane kind of funny sense of humor?
It's not funny.
Say you.
The oldest story on record involving a werewolf is called The Epic of Gilgamesh, and it was written between 1300 and 1000 BCE. It's about a victim werewolf, an unlucky shepherd named Enkidu, which I love that name, by the way, who the goddess Inanna turns into a wolf. Enkidu becomes a wild man. He's covered in long fur and he lives with the animals. Gilgamesh, the hero of the story and just a regular guy, battles Enkidu. And although they have equal strength, Gilgamesh wins because he's civilized and educated. With the loss, Enkidu becomes Gilgamesh's servant. And so the point of the old story is pretty much about like how animal nature can be and needs to be tamed by humans.
Needs to be. Okay. And every time you say Enkidu, I envision that dance where you kick your heels up and sway your arms back and forth.
There's a dance called Enkidu?
It's not called Enkidu, but it's just the way you Enkidu, Enkidu. That's what I pictured. Sorry.
Okie doke. Every time I say Enkidu, I think of ink-a-dink bottle of ink, the cork fell out and you stink. Sorry, that's where I went. We went in different places for sure.
Both demented.
In the Greek text Agriopus Olympionics, a man accused of cannibalism for eating human entrails is turned into a werewolf for 10 years as punishment. Linking human cannibalism to wolves seemed reasonable because wolves are opportunistic eaters. They'll pretty much eat any type of carcass, including humans. They will even eat the remains of their own species. So I always think of wolves as like these beautiful and majestic creatures, but I never knew that. Cannibalism is very unsettling.
Well, talk about hometown buffet.
But should your buffet be at your own home?
Well, apparently, if you're a wolf, yes.
Yes, so. An ancient Greek legend tells the tale of King Lycaon of Arcadia. He was a cruel king and father of many children, but it had been rumored that he was practicing human sacrifice and cannibalism. He also held contempt for the gods. So one night, in order to test the omnipotence of the great god Zeus, he invites Zeus over for dinner. He wanted to serve him a meal he would never forget. The evil King Lycaon had killed, butchered, and served Zeus the boiled flesh of his youngest son. But Zeus is appalled and immediately knew what was going on and restored his young son's life. But now, in a mad rage, Zeus destroys the king's entire household, and a distraught King Lycaon takes to the fields howling and begins to slaughter his own flock as a frightening transformation takes place. His beautiful kingly clothing becomes nasty, gnarly hair. His human arms become furry legs, and then he transforms fully into a werewolf who is cursed to wander the earth as a lonely, savage beast. Man, he got off lucky. If he would have served me up my kid, he would have been the next one in the pot. Boiled well and extra spicy.
Extra spicy? That's very specific.
I'm just saying, he would have been hurting with all that spice.
Exactly. And bring out the air fryer while you're at it.
Right. Make them crispy.
That's right.
The Greek word lycos means wolf and anthropos means man. When you put these two words together, you get lycanthropy or wolfman. This word was created in the 2nd century by a Greek physician to define an affliction where people had the habit of visiting cemeteries on a regular basis and behaving like a wolf. You know, that makes me wonder if they were howling in pain and anguish from losing their loved ones. So maybe that was what was considered wolf-like behavior? That's the only thing that makes sense to me.
That didn't occur to me, but you're right. That does make sense.
Yeah, otherwise, why would they act like wolves?
Partying.
In the cemetery?
You never know.
On the regular?
You never know.
Doing the happy he's dead dance?
Maybe.
I get it. In Germany, 1589, there was a wealthy farmer, Peter Stub, but his name is also spelt Peter Stump, so you can look him up both ways. Stump was a serial killer. His name was given to him as a reference to the fact that his left hand had been cut off, leaving only a stump. It was alleged that there was a killer werewolf that also had its left forepaw cut off, leaving a stump. This identical injury is what proved the guilt of the man becoming the werewolf. Stump was accused of werewolfery, witchcraft, and cannibalism. He admitted to his crimes and the killing of 16 people. He supposedly had fangs and claimed to have an insatiable desire for human blood.
So wait a minute. They didn't add vampirism to the list?
Vampirism?
So shouldn't they have added...
Sound like a vampire on her menstrual cycle. I was like, ew. That's the grossest thing in this story.
Okay, let me see that. They should have added being a vampire to the list.
Yeah, I gotta pull it back together.
Vampirism.
So
Vampirism, right?
You said vampirism. What the hell are you talking about? Okay. All right. Stump at the time was a widower with 2 children, one of which was a daughter named Beale, who was no older than 15 years, and a son of an unknown age. Stump had one of the most famous werewolf trials in history. After being stretched on a rack, he confessed to having practiced black magic since the age of 12. He claimed that he was in alliance with the devil, who had given him a magical belt, or what they called a girdle. This girdle enabled him to transform into a greedy, devouring wolf, strong and mighty, with eyes great and large, which in the night sparkled like fire, a mouth great and wide, with most sharp and cruel teeth, a huge body, and mighty paws. Those were his words. And it was only 3 paws. He didn't say that. By removing the girdle, he transformed back to human. After his capture, he told the local magistrate he had left the girdle in a certain valley. So the magistrate sent for it to be retrieved, but no such girdle was ever found.
I bet some woman found it so she could be all snatched.
She was like, I look great, but where did all this hair come from?
That's right.
For 25 years, Stump had been an insatiable bloodsucker who gorged on the flesh of goats, lambs, sheep, women, and children. Being threatened with torture, he confessed to killing and eating 14 children and 2 pregnant women, whose fetuses he ripped from their wombs and ate their hearts, panting hot and raw. That's gross.
Why don't they ever eat any men?
Men don't taste good. You know that.
Wow, you said it out loud.
I said what everybody was thinking.
I said it, and that's where it sits.
That's right. It's a fact. He later described these fetuses as, quote, dainty morsels, end quote. He's a sick guy. One of the children he murdered was his very own son, whose brain he was reported to have devoured. Stump loved his son dearly. Doesn't sound like it.
Not at all. What the heck?
Right? But in the end, his bloodlust prevailed. Allegedly, he took his son into the woods, transformed himself into a werewolf, and could not stop himself from devouring the boy. You know, I've had plenty of cravings in my days, but eating my own kids, definitely not one of them. Besides, I think they'd be bitter anyway. Then, on top of all that, he was having an incestuous affair with his own daughter, who was sentenced to die with him for having coupled with her father and a distant relative. It's not really clear if she's like a willing participant, but either way, she sounds really young, too young to make these kinds of decisions. So she was definitely a victim, no matter what. So that's truly an injustice.
I fully agree. I really think that Stumpy was all kinds of jacked up.
In so many ways, like every box checked. I think he made a few boxes too.
Yeah, there's some really sick stuff in there.
Yeah, there really is. In addition, Stump confessed to having intercourse with a succubus sent to him by the devil. Following his confession, he was put on trial, and on October 31st, 1589, Happy Halloween, in Cologne, Germany, he was found guilty. His execution was known as one of the most brutal executions in history. He was put on a wheel. I can't help but get that visual of like the Wheel of Fortune. But you know, like this one was not so fortunate no matter what category you landed on.
No Vanna White in this one?
No.
Okay.
No free vacations. No $5,000. From the wheel, check this out. From the wheel, flesh was torn from his body in 10 places with red hot pincers. Then his limbs were broken with the blunt side of an axe head before he was beheaded, and his body burned on a pyre. His daughter and mistress had already been flayed, which means they peeled their skin off. Then they were strangled. How in the heck are they not dead from peeling their skin off?
Oh.
And then they were burned on the pyre with Stump's body.
What's a pyre?
A pyre is, you know how when you see like the Viking burial ritual where they have them up on a bed that's above like a fire?
Oh, yeah.
That's a pyre.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. As a warning to others, a pole was erected and the figure of a wolf was placed on it. And then at the very top, Peter Stump's severed head was impaled. He became known as the werewolf of Bedburg.
Well, we've said it before. The Germans do not play.
They do not. I mean, dang, that's crazy. But hey, he had it coming.
He had it coming 10 times over.
I'm totally pro-German on this one. You go. Well, good German, not that guy. Not Stump. In southern France, between June of 1764 and June of 1767, there were reports of a giant werewolf who attacked over 200 people, half of which died. The victims were disrobed, disemboweled, throats cut, and some of them were beheaded. In June of 1767, a man by the name of Jean Chastel shot the murderous werewolf with bullets made from a silver chalet that was blessed by a priest. This is where the idea of needing silver to kill a werewolf stemmed from. I kind of like being educational.
And they were way ahead of their time.
I wonder whose idea that was.
I mean, very specific. To be silver and be blessed.
Yep. In America, Native Americans have been talking about man-wolves for hundreds of years, but their stories were ignored by many paranormal researchers. The Mohawk Indians believed that they had tribal members who were shapeshifters and they could become creatures. These people were referred to as the Lycan. That's pretty darn close to lichen. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Look at you connecting the dots.
Right?
Of course, I saw LinkedIn.
Of course you did. But the Navajo were also known for their legendary shapeshifting men. They were called skinwalkers. David Floyd says, quote, "In the Navajo, you have this evil witch who is able to change into a wolf or some other type of animal. Typically, they acquire this ability by committing some kind of taboo, like using magic to curse someone instead of healing them. So they contrast with the healer, and as a result, they become a pariah to the culture." End quote. When the colonizers arrived, they made use of some of these existing myths. It gave a reason for why wolves had to be destroyed. Unfortunately, their hatred of wolves would transfer over to the indigenous population. So the way that wolves are seen as savage and voracious creatures was used in racist and violent terms against the Native Americans themselves.
It's amazing that the distorted perception has always been around.
Right? So much hate for so long and for no reason. In the 13th century, in the collection Saga of the Volsungs, werewolves appear multiple times. One example from the saga is a thieving father and son duo who find 2 magic wolf pelts in a forest. They put on the skins, transform into bloodthirsty savage werewolves, and go on a killing rampage engulfed in bloodlust. The father eventually attacked his own son, severely injuring him. This becomes part of the violent history of werewolf tales, the loss of control. The duo is terrified when they realize they can't transform back to human. They didn't know the skins can only be removed every 10 days. But after the 10 days pass, both men return to human form. Horrified by the experience, they burn the magic pelts. From the beginning of their infamous name, werewolves have been associated with solitude and violence. The story claims that as thieves, the two had separated themselves from society and subconsciously invited wolfish tendencies before literally turning into werewolves. So this reminds me kind of like the old saying, "You are what you eat." But with this story, it's like, careful what you wish for because you can eventually embody the evil that lurks within.
Oh, crap. I'm screwed.
Yeah, if you embody your evil, we're all screwed.
Everybody's going down.
I'm getting out of town. As werewolf legends spread across the lands, different cultures contributed their own unique tidbits, resulting in many werewolf variations. Serbian legends say one becomes a werewolf if you drink water from the footprint of a werewolf. Danish tradition dictates that only Danish men can become werewolves. Russians believe a witch places her girdle under a home's threshold on the inhabitant's wedding day. This will turn all the family and friends who are celebrating them into wolves once they cross the threshold.
What is up with the girdles?
I don't know. It was a whole thing back then.
And the Russians, their scenario is so extremely specific.
I know. Why can't there be a magic hat like Frosty the Snowman? So much easier. The introduction of Christianity saw these ancient beliefs as pagan and therefore sinful. So the werewolf became something to be disapproved of and denied through mental illness or demonic influence. Human to wolf transformation would be a defiance of divinity. Only God has the power to alter something so completely. Where symbolically the old saying, "a wolf in sheep's clothing," was something to warn Christians to be on the lookout for those who might threaten the congregation. During the Middle Ages, werewolf legends evolved and expanded, becoming more widespread and more demonized by the church, and reports of werewolf activity increased. In the 1400s in Europe, farming was changing and it was becoming more about sheep, and sheep became the center of the economy. Unfortunately, not only did humans need sheep, but wolves love to attack and eat sheep. It was a favorite. Now the wolves are demonized for destroying expensive sheep, and they were a threat to the livelihood and the economy. And because of this, and because of the pre-existing symbolism within religion regarding the wolf and the sheep as God's flock, it fit well together that the wolf now becomes a monster, with the werewolf the most monstrous, and that the transformation to the wolf was an evil thing caused by the devil.
See, they're making stuff up again.
I just love how they take every situation and twist it and turn it to whatever fits into their narrative.
At the time.
Yeah, at that moment. But still, werewolf stories continue to rise in popularity. So the church's stance on the creature changed. Before, it was a sin to believe in werewolves because a being's physical substance could only be altered by God, remember? But beginning in the later 16th century, it was considered a sin to not believe in werewolves.
Can you say hypocritical?
And confusing? I guess they're trying to keep up with the trends or something. I don't know. Ridiculous.
They're trying to be trendsetters.
Right? They're like, wolves are cool. They're cool.
Right now.
That came after the church shifted its attention to persecuting witches. The church accepted that werewolf stories weren't going anywhere, so they decided to make it more believable that the devil could transform a man into a werewolf. The church saw that it was far better to keep adapting and absorbing these beliefs rather than absolutely refuting them.
That's interesting.
Aren't they so flexible?
Right.
All right, so let's talk about something that's happening currently. Have you heard of the Bray Road Beast?
I have not.
Well, you're going to hear about it now.
Yay. Where's my popcorn?
In the beautiful state of Wisconsin, the city of Elkhorn is only 8 square miles of land and has a population of just over 10,000 people. Elkhorn, from the outside, looks like a Norman Rockwell painting. But the state of Wisconsin has a lot of bizarre and haunted history. There's an abundance of UFO sightings, stories about an aquatic monster that lurks in the base of Lake Winnebago, and hitchhiking phantoms on Highway 12.
Okay. We need to add Wisconsin to our list of things to do. I want to see these hitchhiking phantoms. I have visions of the hitchhiking ghosts on the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. You think they'd be the same?
This little fat, tubby green guy that just smiles and sits on your lap?
Yes.
I don't know. It would be cute if it was.
We're going to have to find out.
Yes, we will. This part of the state is also home to cult activity. The state has also found itself embroiled in satanic activity for many years. In fact, in 2011, 2 women were arrested for luring a man to their Milwaukee apartment and stabbing him over 300 times.
What?
Unbelievably, the man lived and claimed they were performing a satanic ritual on him. So, okay, who is stabbed over 300 times and lives? Do we even have enough body to absorb that many stabs? I mean, God bless the guy, but I'd be scared of him because that's not any kind of natural.
And I swear, when you were talking about these stabbings, I thought the same thing. I mean, I guess unless he's a rather large man and they were using a Swiss Army knife, I don't get it either.
Well, even if he's on like My 600-Pound Life, that's still a lot of stabs.
Have you seen My 600-Pound Life?
I have. If they intended to kill him, you know they're not using some little sissy knife. I mean, they're legit. 300 stab wounds is a lot of work. All right. In the mid-'80s through the early '90s, hundreds of reports came into the local authorities regarding a very large beast that resembled a dog and a wolf, but was much too big to be a dog or a wolf, and it stood on its hind legs. John Frederickson, who was appointed Walworth County Animal Control Officer, received so many sighting calls for this animal that he created a file folder and labeled it the werewolf file. By doing this simple act and by being a county official, it was interpreted that the government was acknowledging the existence of werewolves. Poor guy. He was just trying to get organized.
Exactly. He just wanted an excuse to use his label maker.
I know. Mr. Fredericks went on to say that many people reported seeing this werewolf-looking creature as they were driving down the road. Most were at night, but there were some day sightings too. Sometimes this beast would run in front of a car, or they would see it running or walking down the road. All claimed that it was huge, about 7 to 8 feet tall, and looked to be a humanoid dog, or possibly wolf. It was very hairy and had hands instead of paws. Some saw fangs, red eyes, a long snout, pointy ears, and legs that bent backward like a dog. It was usually standing on 2 legs and is much bigger than a normal-sized man. Bottom line was most claimed it was a nightmare come to life.
That sounds extremely scary.
Doesn't sound good, that's for sure. There was another story of a mother walking down the road with her children, and a deer went running across the road. Then behind it, a creature on 2 legs that resembled a large wolf was chasing the deer. Another story was in 1989. Lori Andreezy, who was at the time a young single mother who worked as a bar manager, was driving home from work one night on Bray Road. Her attention was drawn to something in the ditch. She said she saw something that looked like a dog kneeling in the ditch, eating some kind of roadkill with its palms up. Definitely not the way a dog would eat. She described it exactly as others had described the werewolf, but she said it had yellow glowing eyes. It frightened her very much. She actually went to John Frederickson's office to discuss what she saw, and when they were agreeing that it could have been something supernatural, suddenly books from a shelf behind John started flying at them. They quickly ended the conversation. So you're talking and books just start flying at your head? I mean, how do you even try to explain that?
That's crazy.
It's wild. Lori Andreezy went on to write books about this creature and her experiences, and she claimed that the beast, in her opinion, is satanic in its origin, a demonic entity, or possibly the Dark Prince himself.
It sounds like she was taking a lot of literary liberties on that one.
Well, you know, she was trying to sell a book, but dang.
I mean, she's including a lot of things.
Yeah, she is. She's trying to make it like the most evil.
And she just saw it in the ditch, right? Just the one time?
Just the one time. As far as I know. On January 8th, 1991, Robert Bushman and his wife were driving in Elkhorn when they spotted a large blackish animal running on all fours while chasing a deer on Interstate 43 in broad daylight. They said it was way too big to be a wolf, but couldn't give details because of the speed that it was running at. On September 20th, 1991, Scott Bray, a local farmer, had a sighting of what he had initially referred to as an abnormally large dog in the field behind his house. Scott said the animal is, quote, taller than a German shepherd with pointy ears, a tail, grayish-blackish with long hair, and a massive muscular build, end quote.
So just on a little side observation, you said his name was Scott Bray and Lori was driving on Bray Road. Is this a coincidence?
Not a coincidence. He is of the Bray family that the road is named after. Around the same time as the Scott Bray sighting, another Elkhorn local named Russell Guest spotted a creature on Bray Road, walking briefly on 2 legs before dropping to all fours in an aggressive stance. Guest turned and ran from the creature, who he described exactly the same as Bray had, but he said it had stood on 2 legs first.
That was our big bear wolf.
Right. He ate so many people, he got bigger and stronger.
That's right.
But it wasn't us. On Halloween night, 1991, Doris Gibson reported an encounter with the beast of Bray Road. She was a senior in high school at the time and was driving down Bray Road. She suddenly experienced a muffled thump, and was scared because she thought maybe she had run over a big dog. So she stopped and got out of the car. She said, quote, "I saw this thing. I don't know what it was, but it was big. And then it started running after me. I could hear its feet on the asphalt. Boom, boom, boom. The beast lunged for the car and scraped its claws on the trunk." End quote. Doris showed the scratches on her car to a local reporter named Linda Godfrey. The scratches on the car were consistent with 2 sets of claws going all the way down the back of the trunk.
Wow.
That's scary.
Mm-hmm.
Shortly after Gibson's sighting, a Milwaukee teenager, Tom Brichta, also had an encounter with the beast. Tom claims that on a Saturday night, he was coming home from a wedding reception with his friends, Scott and Chris, who he had in the car with him. He said it was very foggy and you could barely see 2 car lengths ahead of you. Suddenly, he started smelling a strong, foul odor, almost like a skunk. Then he saw just a big, hairy hand sticking out in the road. But his friend looked to see what he was looking at and saw a huge gray, black, and hairy creature reaching out toward the car. It touched the car and scratched off small pieces of the pinstriping. The whole experience was really frightening, and Tom claims that not a day goes by that he doesn't think about the incident. He remembers it like it was yesterday.
Well, of course. He gets in his car every day and he's annoyed that he has to replace the pinstriping.
I would leave it the way it is. That's a great story.
But he's not happy about it.
Obviously, it was very difficult to confirm all the sightings and reports, but Linda Godfrey, a reporter at the time, says she went and interviewed some of these people who made the reports. After speaking with them, she says she never felt like they were insane in any way. In fact, they seemed very truthful. The demographic of people she interviewed was very diverse. They were blue collar, white collar, old, and young. During her interviews, she could see the genuine fear within them as they recounted their stories.
That's a little hard to dispute then if you can actually see that.
Right? Like the real emotion. Linda Godfrey then drew an illustration of the creature based on people's accounts for the newspaper so that others could see what was being reported about this beast. People came out of the woodwork and started calling and writing in to make even more claims and more sighting reports. She said they were astounded at the reaction. Nobody expected it to get as much attention as it did, but the story started to become bigger, and panic set in with the locals as the story grew. The story of the Bray Road Beast began to take on a life of its own. Upon further investigation, sightings continued, and Godfrey received information from witnesses who claimed to have seen the creature decades earlier. One of the most surprising and sinister accounts came in right after the first story broke. But this situation didn't happen in Walworth County. It happened in nearby Jefferson County. A newspaper editor called and claimed that his father saw this thing in 1936. His father, Mark Chapelon, was the night watchman for St. Coletta, an institute for people with special needs. His job every night was to walk the entire grounds with a big flashlight. The institution had preserved a number of ancient burial mounds on their grounds. One night, Mr. Chapelon walked to the burial mound area and saw something large on top of one of the mounds. It had a canine-looking head but was really large. The creature was set deeply on top of one of the mounds and looked like it was trying to get something inside out. He was shocked and said he startled the creature and it ran off. The next night he went back out to the same spot and the creature was there again, but this time when it saw him, it stood up and faced him. Then it made a very deep, strange sound. It sounded like he was uttering the word Gadara. The night watchman knew this word from the New Testament in the Christian Bible. It's the place where Jesus cast the demons out of a man known as a Gadarene, because that's the region where he was from. So was he saying Gadara, Or is this all a very strange coincidence? You know, if that man actually thought that's what he was saying and he knew what that word meant, and this thing was some kind of a werewolf-looking beast, I'd quit my job that moment. I'm out. I'm not playing with that nonsense.
And then go back the next night? Shh. Oh, heck no.
And this thing has grown a pair and faces him? Heck no.
I was wondering what he was digging for.
Me too. So I'm guessing they saved those ancient burial mounds, respectfully. I imagine they might have been a Native American thing.
Oh, you're right. Could have been some type of crypt or some type of...
Yeah, they just didn't want to disturb probably a very sacred site.
So there were bones underneath there.
Who knows? John Frederickson said that after all he's experienced, in his opinion, there's a dark side to this world, and he believes the beast could be something along the supernatural realm. The Satanists could invoke some type of a Celtic beast. With the beast of Bray Road becoming more notorious, the media was tied up in other dark local stories as well. Lots of things were happening in the area. There were reported satanic cult meetings being held in the forested areas of Walworth County. Some of it was definitely rebel teens dabbling with devil worship, but there was also an older crowd practicing their satanic religion, from teachers to law enforcement. They get together at this particular area back in the woods and have their own ritualistic ceremonies in Walworth County.
Can't they get together and play bridge or something?
Well, that's not going to appease the Dark Prince.
Apparently not.
Hello. Frederickson says, quote, one day out of nowhere, a higher up in law enforcement department came in and introduced himself. Then he filled me in on satanic activities happening around the entire state. I think there were 3 or 4 counties that were notorious for occult activity, satanic activity, and I was somewhat surprised that Walworth County just happened to be one of those. End quote. During the late 80s and early 90s, Frederickson was called to scenes of multiple animal mutilations, including one where dozens of mutilated carcasses were discovered. Following this disturbing find, local police insisted that the site was nothing more than a boneyard for local livestock. But Frederickson recognized ritualistic causes of death. The remains had been subject to organ removal and visible, gruesome treatment. But before Frederickson could gather evidence he needed to prove this, local police bulldozed the burial site. Well, isn't that convenient? Sounds to me like some of those satanic ritual participants are trying to hide their dirty deeds.
And that brings up the question, because you did say law enforcement were involved in this, and the higher up came in out of nowhere to introduce himself and spill the satanic beans. You're right. This all sounds like they're trying to cover something up.
For sure. Frederickson wanted to investigate those bulldozed sites because he had learned that many ritualistic beliefs evolve around the notion of conjuring an entity or a demon for nefarious purposes, and he felt that the link between the beast of Bray Road and Satanism might not be too far removed. I would totally agree with that. It sounds like more than a coincidence because those bones had been out there for quite some time, and now all of a sudden they got to go real quick?
Yeah. There's just way too many coincidences with this county.
Right. English professor David Floyd stated that the wolf is seen as the symbol of greed and consumption, probably because it has a violent nature. It is seen as this chaotic force in society that threatens stability in the culture. This is often done through the abuse of science and the abuse of magic or technology. It creates what's called the abhuman, which means it's not human. It's basically an individual that has lost the ability to control themselves and their desires. In some cases, they can't control whether they turn into this creature or not. End quote. As time passed, Godfrey found herself at the center of a werewolf whirlwind. Reporters from 4 television stations appeared in Elkhorn looking for her and eyewitnesses that would go on record about their sightings. Radio and TV services carried a terrifying tale, and modern-day legends roared to life. Curious people came into town in hopes of seeing the legendary big hairy monster. National televised programs such as the show Sightings and Inside Edition spotlighted the Walworth County werewolf, making the story even more monumental. But after the major waves of publicity, slowly Elkhorn began to fade from the limelight, and life on Bray Road went back to their version of normal.
It's funny you say their version of normal, which does include satanic rituals and werewolves.
Which is why I actually put it in there like that exactly. Because I thought I can't say went back to normal because this place ain't normal.
It's far from it.
Godfrey went on to write a book about her experience and all the many reports she continued to get regarding sightings and other people's experiences. In 2003, she released the book, The Beast of Bray Road. But the sightings continued, and in one unforgettable case, the creature was described as larger than an Irish wolfhound that kept pace while chasing a car traveling at 55 miles per hour for well over a mile. Residents of Elkhorn continue to see the creature, but with all of the being made fun of, many will no longer file reports. These people are normal, respectable citizens with jobs and families and don't want the negative attention. So it sounds to me like they're pretty much being gaslighted now, which leaves the creature or creatures to just run amok and do whatever they want. I see a pattern here. Isn't this exactly how Diddy got control over his victims?
Well, wow, that was a jump. Are you comparing him to a werewolf?
Well, he gaslighted everybody.
He did. When this first started happening, nobody made fun of them, right?
Not at first.
But now, after all the TV coverage and everybody going to the town to see it, now they're being made fun of and it's a negative thing?
Well, because it's hard to prove. And just like anything, there's going to be people that are skeptical out there.
The naysayers.
Of course. About 100 miles away in 2017, Ricky Sanchez claims that a pack of these dogman creatures were sighted and now frequent his land. He has had many encounters with them, which include strange, large werewolf-type shapes moving through the field. He even caught one on his outdoor camera. He began to see not one, but multiple pairs of glowing eyes staring at him from the darkness. Soon, the activity would extend to his neighbors' homes. Ricky said, quote, "According to my next-door neighbor, who gets up at 2 a.m. to go to work, he takes his trash out to the road in his truck. Then he carries it to the corner for pickup. But then he hears something near the truck. He turns around and sees a big wolf-like creature in a crouching position, but not on all fours. He's pacing back and forth in front of his pickup truck. When he saw this, he froze with fear. But he had to get to his truck, and when he finally does, the creature left. He then took a minute to regain his composure because he had no idea what that bizarre creature was." End quote. Okay, is it me? Am I weird that the thought of a werewolf acting wild and ferocious, like you'd expect a werewolf to act, all of a sudden doesn't seem as frightening as a seemingly annoyed and worried werewolf that's pacing? That type of human-like anxiety would completely throw me off. I would have ran for my life.
Well, first of all, I would have walked to work. And it almost seems like if he's big and hairy, pacing back and forth, maybe he's a hippie out for a walk.
Crouched down, facing, red eyes.
He could have been drunk or hungover, waiting for a ride, called his Uber. Who knows?
You're like one of those people trying to sell your story to the Inquirer.
Well, if anybody's listening, I have a lot of them.
Oh, like that was way off. So this was a lot of information that I hope you all enjoyed hearing about. There's no big ending to this story because it's not over, and there is a ridiculous amount of information out there about werewolves. I was rather surprised at how far back in history the werewolf legacy goes. This is one of those scary monster creatures that we grew up with, and at no time did I ever think it was or even could be real. But with all the documented information that goes back for centuries, could it be even slightly based on something very real? It sounds like many people back then and many people now definitely believe so. So this has made me wonder, are there truly werewolves in sheep's clothing out there? Look around. You may not be able to spot them. But if you look really hard, you might see the werewolves who blatantly wear their wolf's clothing loud and proud, but we're too blind to see. I'm going to leave you with a couple of my favorite wolf quotes. First one is, "Careless shepherds make an excellent dinner for wolves." That was by Earl Dare Biggers. I like that name. Second one is, "A fox is just a wolf who sends flowers." So don't be fooled, ladies. That's by Ruth Brown.
Wow, well, that was extremely interesting. And I think I've dated some of those people wearing the wolf's clothing loud and proud.
You thought they were a fox?
That's right. So history has proven me wrong.
Too funny. Yeah, I thought this was a really interesting subject. And honestly, I think we could talk about wolves and werewolves for months to come.
Well, we could probably save some for next year's.
There you go. We'll do a part 2 a year later.
And I think it's a great way to end the month.
Until next year, Oxspookterfest.
Oh, well, thank you for the research you did on this. I know there was a lot of it.
There was a lot. I did kind of have to pick and choose, but hopefully everybody enjoyed it.
We'd like to thank the listeners. We hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Don't forget to take care and remember to let your grimaginations run wild. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, X at grimwitwithdimwits, Facebook grimwitwithdimwits, and YouTube grimwitwithdimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes, and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.